Hello everybody, Kemo Sabi here, coming at you with another video. So this one's off of Watershed Sentinel webpage. I read it by Gavin MacRae, published March 22nd, 2019, with the topic of Will Canada back a proposal to stop scuttling plastic waste to poorer nations? Photos of seabird carcasses stuffed with disposable cigarette lighters and plastic bottle caps are losing their shock value. Images of sea turtles eating polyethylene bags could become cliché. Everyone knows our planet is choking on plastic waste. As one scientific paper puts it, plastic waste is now so ubiquitous in the environment that it has been suggested as a geological indicator of the proposed Anthropocene era. In response, some countries have gotten serious about plastic waste. The EU voted for a complete ban on many single-use plastics last October. The UK is legislating minimum recycled content on plastic packaging and plans to make producers put the full cost of recycling their wares. In India, disposable plastic bags are unlawful. In Kenya, getting caught with a disposable plastic bag can earn jail time. In contrast, Canada's approach to the plastic crisis has been long on rhetoric, short on legislation, and heavily invested in plastics production. As George John MP for Courtenay Alberni sees it, we are a huge laggard on this issue. What we need, instead of platitudes and forecasts of commitments that are years out, is legislation and regulations to implement now. Currently, he says, the federal government is making historic investments in the plastics industry. They want to be global leaders in plastics production. They're saying, well, we care and we're going to recycle more plastic because we're going to produce more plastic. Vito Buonsanti, plastics program manager for the NGO Environmental Defence Canada, shares John's frustration. The federal government is saying, let's cut plastic, but the reality is there's nothing really being done. Industry keeps pushing this narrative that recycling needs to be improved and people need to be educated to recycle more, but that's not really the problem. The evidence overwhelmingly shows that recycling can be a solution for the plastic waste issue, says Bonset. It can be used in limited situations. If you think about single-use plastics, one of the examples where recycling kind of works is PET plastic bottles. When there is a deposit return scheme, you manage to reach high levels of collection, and then it's okay. Environmental Defense believes increased recycling would be effective if integrated within a national strategy on plastics, and would see a ban on difficult to recycle plastics, legislation to eliminate throwaway plastics, and a recycled content standard of 75% for new products. Right now, a dismal 9% of plastic waste is recycled globally. In Canada, the number crawls to 11%. Roughly 40% of plastic is produced for packaging and single-use items. Some numbered plastics aren't even recyclable, and Bosensent says the recycling symbol on these is totally meaningless, nor can plastics be recycled repeatedly. Unlike steel or glass, after one or two passes through the circular economy, plastic is degraded and contaminated and headed for the landfill or incinerator. Pay with plastic. Michael MacEwen is the general manager of Gabriola Island Recycling Organizations. He says polyethylene terephthalate, PET, water bottles, ketchup bottles, mayo jars generally makes money for the recycling depot. So does high-density polyethylene. Number 2, the HDPE, milk jugs, laundry detergent bottles, low-value plastics such as polyvinyl chloride, PVC, softer plastic containers, low-density polyethylene, LDPE, plastic films and shopping bags, and polypropylene, yogurt cups, takeout cups, currently cost the organization up to $180 per ton to be hauled away. MacEwen says that until producers are taxed and regulations are in place, we're going to be chasing our tails on this, just scrambling with recycling, and having massive amounts of plastic in the ocean or in the marketplace and no end market to send it to. The problem is set to get much worse. Plastic production is expected to triple by 2050. Hydraulic fracking has made natural gas as cheap and common feedstock for plastic production, spurring huge investments in plastics infrastructure. So too will emissions grow. The production of plastic is estimated to consume 20% of the annual oil consumption globally by 2050. All this fracking is happening in BC. A lot of that gas, or the byproducts of that gas, are going to go into the production of plastics, says Bodenstein. Right now, the federal government is saying that they want to reduce plastic waste, but the reality is that at the same time, provinces and the federal government are subsidizing new production of plastic. A clear example of subsidized infrastructure is a $3.5 billion plastics facility under construction northwest of Edmonton that, according to reporting by the CBC, was attracted by a provincial program offering $500 million in royalty relief initiatives to the plastics industry. In Ontario, the provincial government chipped in $100 million to a project that will double the capacity of polyethylene feedstock operation in the Sarnia-Lambton area and a production increase of 450 kilotons per year. The waste bin of the developed world. Until the beginning of 2018, China accepted 45% of global plastic waste. For the first world, it was a tidy solution for much of the 380 million tons of plastic waste produced annually. In China, it was not so tidy. The flood of waste fueled a cottage industry where peasants scratch a subsistence income from primitive recycling. Surrounded by plastic garbage, children live in toxic slums, and vast amounts of unrecyclable plastics are haphazardly dumped or burned. Much of it is to end up in waterways and ultimately the ocean. Research published in 2017 estimates that 90% of all marine plastics waste enters the ocean from only 10 rivers, and 8 of them are in Asia. The narrative is that these countries are the biggest responsible for polluting our oceans, says Bodenstein. And that is often because we send them our plastic. They don't have the infrastructure to deal with that plastic, and then it ends up in the ocean. Not only are we causing the problem, we're also blaming developing countries. According to Bodenstein, about a third of the plastic waste collected for recycling in Canada is exported. Last year, exporting countries got a wake-up call when China announced an import ban on all but the purest waste plastic. Recyclers have scrambled to find markets for the estimated 111 million tons of plastic that will be displaced because of the ban by 2030. With nowhere to go, plastic waste is piling up. Some municipalities in Canada, the US, and elsewhere have resorted to landfilling plastic after it has been collected from recycling programs. The market for poorly regulated or illegal plastic waste processing is now quickly shifting to other countries such as Thailand, Malaysia, Vietnam, and Indonesia. Thailand has seen imports of polyethylene terephthalate waste skyrocket 876%, prompting an emergency embargo. One town in Malaysia was reported smothered by 17,000 tons of plastic waste that was burned or dumped by illegal plastic recycling operations. Thankfully, Canada will soon have a chance to support a groundbreaking proposal to end passing the buck on plastic waste to poor nations. Basel Convention. The Basel Convention on the Control of Transboundary Movement of the Hazardous Waste and Their Disposal is a long-standing international agreement used to control the global trade flow of toxic materials such as asbestos, lead, and e-waste. It is unique and could be harnessed to curtail the plastic crisis. Norway, a leader in plastic waste management, has put forth a proposal to classify plastic waste as waste requiring special consideration. Under the Basel Convention, the Basel Convention, this would force exporters to get the consent of countries they export plastic waste to, and ensure receiving countries have the means to properly process plastic waste. Polluted or contaminated waste could be refused, ratcheting up pressure on the importing countries to improve their own plastic waste management domestically. I am very much in favor of Norway's proposal, says Bosenseit. What that amendment would do is basically increase transparency and also require previous informed consent from the receiving country. A 2018 analysis by researchers at the University of Georgia argues such a proposal could also provide a framework for knowledge sharing and prompting the proper management of waste, including harmonization of technical standards and practices which could help build capacity to properly manage plastic waste around the world. Jim Puckett is the executive director of the Basel Action Network, an NGO with observer status in the Basel Convention. He believes the EU, a power bloc in the Basel Convention, will agree to back the proposal. A legion of nations, including China, Malaysia, Thailand, and Japan, has voiced support or filed documents in support of the proposal. Puckett says Canadian officials were not on board at all with the proposal at a public meeting in 2018. If Puckett's prediction is borne out and the EU backs the proposal, Canada could find itself the lone holdout among the world's top 10 plastic waste exporters who are parties to the Basel Convention. Plastic trade associations have opposed the proposal, citing administration burdens and paradoxically fears of illegal dumping. The U.S., which is not a member of the Basel Convention, has filed comments as an observer against the idea. Because Basel Convention members cannot trade Basel-controlled materials with non-members with serious expectations, the U.S. would lose easy access to the global plastic waste market, thereby gaining initiative to process and reduce their own plastic waste. A decision is scheduled for April at the next conference of the parties of the Basel Convention in Geneva. So far, Canada is still fence-sitting in response to requests for commitment. A federal Ministry of Environment and Climate Change spokesperson wrote in February that Canada's position on the proposal is under development and subject to upcoming international negotiations. So the government of Canada is not in a position to provide further information at this time. If Canada tries to scuttle the proposal, Puckett says, they'll use ambiguous language. They'll say, we need to do further work. Let's have a working group. And it'll drag on for 4 years or something. For Bosenseit, political action is key to tackling the plastic crisis. We need regulations that guide behaviors, he says. Just like climate change is not going to be solved by turning down the heat and wearing a sweater and consuming a bit less. It is the same with plastic, because in many cases people have no choice but to buy plastic products. Only laws can drive change. And another little piece in the write-up here, for over 2 decades Canada has been stalling a different Basel Convention amendment aimed at forbidding the export of hazardous waste. Only 2 more signatories are needed to meet the 3/4 threshold to ratify the amendment. For Filipinos, Canada's refusal to sign is especially galling. In 2013 and 2014, 103 shipping containers arrived in the Philippines from Canada, labeled as recycling, but actually was garbage. They sit quarantined in port still, despite promises by Prime Minister Justin Trudeau to deal with the garbage. So there you have it, everybody. An interesting write-up about plastics, and hopefully you enjoyed it. Leave me some comments, would be great. It would be awesome if you subscribe. Kemo, Sabi out. We'll see you in the next one, everybody. Thanks. Bye.